The moment Clint Eastwood stepped up to the counter, a calmness in his demeanor masked the shock creeping in. He had just been told his seat had been given away. Overbooked, they said. Overbooked? Clint Eastwood? His jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. "You're kidding, right?" he asked, his voice steady but a hint of disbelief hanging in the air. The attendant's face remained professional. "I'm afraid not, sir. We're offering compensation for anyone willing to take the next flight." Clint's eyes flicked to the young woman standing at the other end of the terminal. She was fidgeting with her worn-out ticket, her gaze glued to the floor, clearly struggling with something. Clint's thoughts were interrupted by the attendant's offer. "We're giving out a $500 voucher and a meal voucher for anyone willing to give up their seat." The offer was tempting, but Clint wasn't about to let an opportunity slip by. Not today. Not after seeing the woman's anxiety. He could easily take the flight and enjoy the extra perks, but that wouldn't change anything. He felt a strange pull to her, and just as quickly as the thought hit him, his decision was made. Without hesitation, Clint turned back to the counter. "I'll take the voucher," he said with a calm nod. The attendant blinked in surprise, expecting him to argue, but Clint had no intention of arguing. Instead, he glanced over at the young woman whose face was still downcast. "She needs that seat more than I do. Let her take it." The attendant was stunned, unsure of how to process this moment. And then Clint added with a wry grin, "I'm not going to use the voucher, but she's going to need a flight today." The attendant's eyes widened, and just as she was about to say something, Clint walked over to the woman who hadn't noticed him approaching. "You're going to make your flight," Clint said, his voice soft but insistent. The woman looked up at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Wait, what?" Clint smiled, the kind of smile that didn't need words. "Trust me, I'm not getting on this plane, but you are." The young woman stood frozen, staring at Clint as if she couldn't quite process what he was saying. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clint gave her a knowing look, his gaze steady. "Sometimes the universe just gives you a second chance. Take it." Her eyes flicked from Clint to the counter where the attendant was now staring at them both, clearly unsure what to do. After a long moment she spoke up, voice filled with gratitude but still tinged with disbelief. "But why would you give up your seat for me?" Clint's lips curled into a small but genuine smile. "Let's just say I've had my fair share of second chances. You deserve yours." The attendant finally processed the situation and handed her a boarding pass. As the woman reached for it, her hands were shaking. She looked back at Clint, who simply nodded and gave her a soft, reassuring smile. She hesitated for just a second before saying, "Thank you, I don't even know what to say. This is insane." Clint watched her as she took the pass, then turned to walk toward the gate. But before she got too far, Clint called after her. "Hey," he said, his voice calm but firm. She turned to face him, still in shock. "Don't waste your second chance. Make it count." With those words hanging in the air, Clint turned away, his expression unreadable as he walked out of the terminal. He didn't need to hear what happened next. But deep down, he knew that what he had done would change the young woman's life, in a way neither of them could fully understand yet. As Clint exited the terminal, the weight of his decision settled in. He wasn't sure why he had felt so compelled to help a complete stranger. Maybe it was the way she looked, so vulnerable and lost. Or maybe it was something more, something instinctual, like fate had pushed him in her direction. He didn't have time to dwell on it. He had a flight to catch, albeit not today. But as he left the airport, he couldn't shake the feeling that this small act of kindness was only the beginning. Meanwhile, the young woman, now boarding the plane, sat in her seat with her mind racing. She looked at the boarding pass in her hand, still trying to wrap her head around the fact that Clint Eastwood had just given up his seat for her. It didn't make sense. Why him? Why her? She was just an ordinary person, nothing special, no celebrity, no millionaire. Yet here she was, on a flight she almost missed, with a story that no one would believe. She leaned back in her seat, trying to calm her nerves, but her heart kept pounding. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, her mind went into overdrive. She remembered the look in Clint's eyes, that silent determination that told her she was worth helping. It was as if he knew something she didn't, a deeper truth about life, about second chances. The flight attendants began their safety routine, but the young woman wasn't paying attention. Instead, she thought about her life, her struggles, and how far she'd come just to get here. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe, just maybe, this was the push she needed to finally break free from the life she had been trapped in. She had been stuck, for so long, afraid to take risks. But now she felt something shift inside her. Clint Eastwood's gesture wasn't just about a seat on a flight. It was about something much bigger, a reminder that kindness could change everything. And with that thought, the young woman made a decision. She was going to change her life. No more waiting for permission, no more holding back. She would take this second chance, and she would make it count. And as the plane took off, she silently promised herself, this was her time. Weeks passed, and Clint's small act of kindness slowly faded from his mind. He was busy with his next project, his days filled with meetings, scripts, and plans for his upcoming films. But in a quiet corner of the world, the young woman was undergoing a transformation. Her name was Sarah, and the flight she had almost missed marked the turning point in her life. After landing, Sarah found herself walking through the bustling city streets with a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't stop thinking about Clint's words, "Don't waste your second chance, make it count." It echoed in her mind like a mantra, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt a spark of hope. She had spent most of her life playing it safe, living paycheck to paycheck, never daring to dream beyond what was right in front of her. But that day, in the plane, something inside her had shifted. She knew she needed to make a bold move. Within days, Sarah enrolled in a coding boot camp she had been eyeing for months but was too scared to pursue. She started networking, reaching out to people in her field, taking risks she would have avoided before. It wasn't easy, nothing worth doing ever was, but each step forward felt like a victory. And then, one day, months later, Sarah received a job offer from one of the top tech companies in the country. She had done it. She had turned her life around, and it all started with a simple act of kindness. Clint Eastwood would never know just how much his gesture had changed her. It wasn't just about giving up a seat on a plane. It was about offering her something she had never had before, a chance, and it had made all the difference. On the day of her new job's orientation, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, staring at the woman she had become. She hardly recognized herself. There was confidence in her eyes now, something that had been absent for so long. As she adjusted her jacket and made her way out the door, she thought about Clint one last time. "Thank you," she whispered to herself, feeling a deep gratitude she couldn't fully express. "You gave me more than just a flight." Months passed, and Sarah's new life took off in ways she had never imagined. She excelled in her job, quickly moving up the ranks in the tech company. People began noticing her innovative ideas, her fierce determination, and her ability to lead. But as Sarah's career soared, she never forgot the moment that changed everything for her, the moment Clint Eastwood had given up his seat on the plane for her. It stayed with her, a constant reminder of the power of kindness. She made it, her mission to pass that kindness forward. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, Sarah walked home through the city streets, deep in thought. She passed a homeless man sitting on the curb, his face worn by years of hardship. Something in his eyes reminded her of herself not so long ago. Lost, hopeless, trapped. Without thinking, Sarah approached him. "Hey, are you hungry?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man looked up, surprised. "I could use a meal," he said softly. Without a second thought, Sarah offered to buy him dinner. She didn't have much money herself, but she didn't need much. What mattered was the gesture. They sat together at a small diner, and Sarah listened as the man told her his story, one of loss, poor choices, and missed opportunities. It was the kind of story she had heard a million times but never fully understood until now. As they finished their meal, Sarah smiled at him and handed him a small card with the name of a local shelter. "You're not alone in this," she said. "There's always a way out." The man's eyes welled up with gratitude, and for the first time in a long while, he seemed hopeful. "Thank you," he whispered. Sarah stood up to leave, her heart swelling with emotion. As she walked away, she thought of Clint, his act of kindness that had sparked her transformation. And she knew, deep down, that his impact had rippled far beyond that moment in the airport. She had made a decision that day, to never forget the power of a small act of kindness and to always pass it on. And as she walked into the future, Sarah knew that the best way to honor Clint was to keep changing lives, one person at a time.